Okay, so today we're diving deep into Angela Merkel and her relationship with Israel, going beyond the usual headlines and sound bites. We've got excerpts from her memoir right here. And let me tell you, it's not just about like diplomacy and stuff. It gets pretty personal.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? How those personal experiences actually shaped her political decisions. We're talking about a woman who, grew up in East Germany, right? Limited access to Israel. And then she becomes this global figure, deeply invested in the country's future.
Exactly. You actually pointed out something in her memoir that I found like really striking. She talks about how in East Germany, she couldn't even get like research papers from Israeli scientists. I mean, can you imagine that today?
Oh, it was a totally different world back then. Meanwhile, West Germany's got these thriving research collaborations with Israel. Think like the Weizmann Institute and the Max Planck Institute working together. And Merkel herself, she admits this contrast really made an impression on her.
So, I mean, would it be safe to say that like her early experiences, seeing these two very different approaches to Israel, influenced her later focus on research collaborations as chancellor?
Oh, absolutely. In her memoir, she even talks about her first trip to Israel in 1991 as Minister for Women and Youth, right? And she was surprised by how much more attention the Minister of Research and Technology was getting. It's like a light bulb went off for her. Science and research, they were key to building a strong, positive relationship with Israel.
And that wasn't just talk. She actually went and expanded her ministry's youth exchange program to include Israeli teenagers specifically, almost as if, she was trying to make up for lost time, but for those years when access to Israel was so restricted, to spark interest in Israel, among young Germans, especially those from the former East.
That's a great point. It wasn't just about formal agreements on paper. It was about building those person-to-person connections, fostering understanding from a young age. And this theme of connecting with Israel on a personal level, it really runs through her entire political career.
Okay, so we're seeing this early emphasis on research collaboration and personal connection. Let's fast forward a bit, okay? So we know Merkel went on to have many, many significant visits to Israel throughout her time as chancellor, of course. But is there one that you think was particularly pivotal, in shaping her reason of state approach?
It's tough to pick just one, but her 2008 visit, that one really stands out. Think about it. First German chancellor to address the Knesset. First German-Israeli government consultations. It marked a real turning point in the relationship.
Hold on, back up for a second. For those of us who, might not be total history buffs,
Yeah.
What exactly does reason of state mean in this context? It's a phrase that comes up a lot with Merkel, but it's kind of vague, isn't it?
Yeah, good catch. It's definitely a phrase that deserves some unpacking. Essentially, in this context, reason of state refers to Germany's fundamental interest in ensuring Israel's safety and well-being. But for Merkel, it went beyond just acknowledging Israel's right to exist. It implied an active role in supporting the country, diplomatically, economically, and even militarily.
So it's not just about saying nice things. It's about like putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
Exactly. And the 2008 visit was full of moments that really embodied this reason of state approach, like traveling with Charlotte Knobloch, right, president of the Central Council of Jews in Germany, whose family was directly impacted by the Holocaust. It added this incredibly poignant layer to the trip.
Wow, that's powerful. And then there was that visit to the Slowboker Kibbutz, where David Ben-Gurion lived. I remember reading about that in her memoir. It's like she was intentionally immersing herself in Israeli history, trying to understand the nation's soul on a deeper level.
It wasn't just about paying respects to the past. It was about connecting that past to the present and the future. She even had this fascinating discussion with Shimon Peres about water supply solutions, showing that she was interested in concrete ways that Germany and Israel could collaborate on shared challenges,
Okay, so we've got this backdrop of reason of state and Merkel's commitment to supporting Israel on multiple levels. But this 2008 visit, wasn't that also when she gave that historic speech to the Knesset, the one that caused a bit of a stir?
Ah, yes, the Knesset speech. It was meticulously planned, and it delivered a powerful message about Germany's responsibility, shared values and support for a two-state solution. But you're right, it wasn't without controversy. Some Knesset members even walked out during her speech. It was a bold move, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To address the Knesset directly, especially given the, the sensitivities around German-Israeli relations. I think her decision to speak so frankly, to acknowledge Germany's responsibility, but at the same time, advocate for a peaceful future. I think it really resonated with a lot of Israelis.
But there were those protests too, It couldn't have been easy to just stand there facing that kind of dissent and still deliver such a powerful message.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes about her character. Her commitment to this idea of reason of state. She didn't shy away from difficult conversations or uncomfortable truths. In fact, she leaned into them, even when it meant facing criticism.
She really seemed to embrace this reason of state idea. In the memoir, she talks about how the phrase like evolved for her over time, from having a negative connotation regarding the GDR to becoming this positive force in her approach to Israel.
It's almost as if she reclaimed the phrase, imbued it with new meaning. It became less about like cold, calculated political strategy and more about a moral obligation, a deep sense of responsibility towards Israel's well-being.
And this wasn't just empty rhetoric, right? I mean, her actions as chancellor really reflected this commitment. We're talking about unwavering diplomatic support for a two-state solution, efforts to curb Iran's nuclear program,
Right.
military support through like arms supplies, even participation in UNIFIL in Lebanon.
Right. Now, for those who might not be familiar, UNIFIL is a United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon, tasked with maintaining stability along the border with Israel. And Germany's involvement there, under Merkel's leadership, it was significant, really. It was a tangible demonstration of her reason of state in action, a commitment to actively contributing to Israel's security.
It's interesting how you mentioned that her reason of state, it wasn't just about acknowledging the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also about actively shaping a more peaceful future. That seems particularly relevant now, given the 2023 Hamas attacks on Israel and the global surge in anti-Semitism that followed.
Sadly, yes, those attacks were a horrific reminder of the fragility of peace and the persistent threat of hatred and violence and the surge in anti-Semitism that followed. Even here in Germany, it was deeply disturbing, really.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to see those kinds of incidents happening, especially, after all the progress that's been made. I know Merkel has always been a vocal advocate for fighting anti-Semitism. In her memoir, she's incredibly clear that freedom of expression can never be used to justify hatred or incite violence.
Absolutely. For her, combating anti-Semitism wasn't just a matter of policy. It was a fundamental duty, a cornerstone of German identity in the post-Holocaust era.
And it wasn't just talk. I mean, she backed up her words with concrete actions, right? Both domestically and on the international stage. What strikes me is how she connected this fight against anti-Semitism to her broader reason of state approach regarding Israel.
That's a crucial insight. For Merkel, these two things were intertwined. Protecting Israel wasn't just about military defense or diplomatic maneuvers. It was also about combating the ideologies and prejudices that fueled anti-Semitism and threatened the very fabric of a peaceful and tolerant society.
So looking back at her entire tenure as chancellor, what do you think is the most enduring legacy of Merkel's reason of state approach?
That's a complex question, but I think it's her unwavering commitment to not just acknowledging Germany's historical responsibility, but actively working to repair the relationship with Israel, ensure its safety and prosperity.
It's almost like she took this incredibly heavy burden of history and turned it into a driving force for positive change. It's a powerful example of how confronting the past can lead to a better future.
It certainly challenges the notion that reason of state is always about, cold, calculated self-interest. In Merkel's case, it was deeply intertwined with a sense of moral obligation and a genuine desire for reconciliation and peace.
Okay, so we've unpacked this idea of reason of state and seen how it played out in Merkel's policies and actions. But what does this all mean for us today? For those of us who weren't directly involved in shaping these historical events. It makes you think, right, about the choices we face today, even on a smaller scale. How do we balance our own interests, with a sense of responsibility towards others, especially when those others might be far away or seem unconnected to our daily lives?
That's a really profound question. It reminds me of that moment Merkel describes in her memoir. Standing in Ben-Gurion's former home, she writes about feeling this almost tangible sense of history, like she was standing in the presence of these two figures who dared to imagine a different future, a future of reconciliation between Germany and Israel.
Yeah, I got chills when I read that passage. It's easy to get bogged down in the political complexities and all that, but that anecdote, it brings it back to the human level. to the courage it takes to bridge divides and build something new.
It's a powerful reminder that even amidst, seemingly insurmountable challenges, there's always the possibility for change, for hope. And that's something each of us can carry forward in our own lives and interactions.
Okay, so if we zoom out a bit, what do you think are the lasting implications of Merkel's approach to Israel? How might this concept of reason of state evolve in the future, given the constantly shifting geopolitical landscape?
Well, we live in a world where new conflicts are constantly emerging, where alliances are shifting, and where the very definition of national interest is being redefined. It's hard to predict exactly how Merkel's legacy will play out in this context, but I think she's set a powerful precedent.
In what way?
She's shown that reason of state can be about more than just, realpolitik or narrow self-interest. It can be a force for good,
Yeah.
a way to acknowledge historical wrongs and actively work towards a better future, even when it requires sacrifice and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
So it's about looking beyond the immediate moment towards a longer-term vision of peace and reconciliation.
Precisely. And it requires courage, a willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's unpopular
Right.
or inconvenient.
Thinking about all we discussed today, Merkel's early experiences, her evolving understanding of reason of state, her commitment to fighting anti-Semitism, and those incredibly powerful moments of personal connection. What stands out to you most? What's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this deep dive?
It's difficult to choose just one thing, but I think what's most striking is how Merkel's vision for the German-Israeli relationship, it goes beyond a purely transactional approach. It's deeply rooted in historical awareness, personal connection, and a genuine belief in the possibility of a shared future built on peace and understanding.
So it's not just about diplomacy. It's about building bridges, fostering empathy, and facing the future together.
Exactly. And I think that's a powerful message, not just for Germany and Israel, but for all of us, as we navigate a world increasingly marked by division and conflict.
Well said. I think you've given our listener a lot to think about today.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine.
It's been fascinating to delve into this unique relationship, marked by both historical burdens and a shared commitment to a better future.
And it's been particularly poignant to consider Merkel's legacy, in light of the recent events surrounding the 2023 Hamas attacks.
Her unwavering stance against anti-Semitism and her call for continued vigilance, they resonate even more strongly now.
Absolutely, especially in a world where those threats, they seem to be reemerging in new and disturbing ways.
It's a reminder that the fight against intolerance and hatred, it's an ongoing struggle, one that requires constant effort and commitment from all of us.
That's a powerful thought to leave us with. I hope this deep dive has given you, dear listener, some new insights into this complex and evolving relationship. It's a relationship that will undoubtedly continue to shape global events for years to come.
And remember that moment Merkel described in the kibbutz, right? That feeling of history being made, of seemingly impossible things becoming possible. It's a reminder that even amidst the darkest chapters, there's always hope for a brighter future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the remarkable relationship between Germany and Israel through the